Have you ever poured your entire soul into something, into someone, only to watch it all crumble into dust in a single, gut-wrenching moment? Have you ever felt the sting of being invisible, of your deepest passions and sincerest love being treated as nothing more than a stepping stone for another's ambition? This is the story of a heart shattered, not just by betrayal, but by the theft of a dream. It is the story of Alara, a woman whose hands, though calloused from scrubbing floors, held the delicate magic of a master chef. She moved through the world quietly, a ghost in a blue janitor's uniform, her spirit a simmering pot of talent and hope that no one ever bothered to taste. Her life was a simple one, built around two loves, the memory of her mother's cooking and the man she thought was her future, Liam. For 5 years, he had been her world. Their anniversary was a sacred day, a celebration of the life they were building. This year, Alara had saved for weeks to buy the perfect ingredients for their special dinner, a meal she planned to cook at his apartment. It was a small dream, but it was hers. Then, just hours before she was set to leave, her phone buzzed with a message that was as cold and sterile as the hallways she cleaned. Something's come up. Can't make it tonight. Rain check, no apology. No explanation. Just a dismissal. The words hit her like a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. She stared at the screen, the bright, vibrant vegetables on her small kitchen counter suddenly looking dull and lifeless. The hope that had filled her apartment only moments before now seeped out, leaving a cold, hollow ache in its place. The anniversary, their 5 years, canceled with the casual indifference one might use for a forgotten appointment. She sank onto her small, worn sofa, the silence of her apartment amplifying the frantic, painful beating of her heart. She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The cancellation was not just a broken promise, it was the chilling prelude to a public spectacle of deceit that would tear her world apart and, ultimately, force her to discover a strength she never knew she possessed. The pain of that moment was a sharp, piercing blade, but the true devastation was still waiting in the wings, ready to take center stage on millions of television screens across the country. The hours that followed the text message were a blur of quiet misery. Alara tried to busy herself, to scrub away the hurt with the same vigor she used on the floors of the broadcast tower where she worked. She polished her tiny apartment until it gleamed, but no amount of cleaning could wipe away the image of Liam's cold, impersonal words. The television hummed in the corner, a mindless distraction she'd turned on to fill the suffocating silence. It was tuned to the very network whose offices she mopped each night, now broadcasting its biggest live event of the season, a toast to talent, a gala celebrating the nation's rising stars. She paid it little mind, her thoughts a tangled mess of confusion and sorrow. Why would he cancel? What could be so important? A familiar laugh, deep and resonant, cut through her stupor. Her head snapped up. It was Liam's laugh. But that was impossible. He was supposed to be caught up in something urgent, something unavoidable. Her eyes focused on the screen, her heart beginning to pound a frantic, sickening rhythm against her ribs. There he was. Not in some emergency, not stuck in a meeting. He was standing on a brightly lit stage, dressed in a tailored suit she'd never seen before, looking more handsome and confident than she had ever seen him. And he was not alone. Standing beside him, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm, was her Aunt Serena. Serena, the celebrated food critic, her mother's estranged sister, a woman who moved in circles so far removed from Alara's life that they might as well have been on different planets. Alara's breath hitched. A wave of nausea rolled over her as the show's host, a man with a dazzling white smile, announced them. And now, a special moment with rising architectural star, Liam Vance, and the undisputed queen of cuisine, Serena Hale. The camera zoomed in on their smiling faces, a perfect picture of success and glamour. Alara felt like she was watching a movie, a surreal nightmare from which she couldn't wake. This was where he was. This was his urgent business. A cold dread, far deeper than simple heartbreak, began to creep into her veins. It was a feeling of profound, earth-shattering betrayal, playing out for the entire world to see. He had not just lied to her, He had erased her. As Alara stared, frozen in disbelief, the host's voice boomed from the speakers. Liam, we hear you have something very special to share tonight. Not just a celebration of your recent success, but a tribute to the love that inspires you. Liam took the microphone, his smile practiced and polished for the cameras. He looked directly at Serena, his eyes gleaming with a frighteningly convincing sincerity. Serena, he began, his voice smooth as silk, from the moment I met you, you brought a new flavor to my life. To show you how much you mean to me, I wanted to create something that speaks the language you understand best, the language of the heart. He gestured to a small, elegant table brought onto the stage. On it sat a single, perfect dessert, a delicate, rose-shaped apple tart with a glistening caramel lattice, dusted with what looked like edible gold. Alara's world stopped spinning. A gasp escaped her lips, small and wounded. That wasn't just any dessert. It was her dessert. It was Mama's blossom, the recipe her own mother had perfected, the one she had whispered to a young Alara on her deathbed like a sacred secret. It was the legacy of her past and the blueprint for her future. She had spent years mastering its every nuance, the precise thickness of the apple slices, the secret spice blend in the almond frangipane, the painstaking technique for the spun sugar lattice that represented the beautiful, tangled nature of love. She had made it for Liam only once, on their first anniversary, explaining its deep, personal meaning. He had called it a masterpiece. Now he was presenting it as his own creation, a symbol of his love for another woman, her own aunt. The violation was absolute. It was the theft of her soul, broadcast to millions. In her mind's eye, she saw her mother's worn, flour-dusted hands guiding her own. She saw the faded, spidery handwriting in the recipe book that was her most prized possession. That tart was more than just sugar and fruit. It was a testament to a love that was pure and real, a love Liam had just desecrated on national television. The pain was no longer just about a canceled dinner or a faithless boyfriend. This was an act of profound erasure, a public declaration that her history, her talent, and her heart were his to plunder and repurpose as he saw fit. In the state-of-the-art control room high above the glittering stage, the mood was electric. Ratings were spiking. The hashtag #LoveBlossom was trending worldwide. Marcus, the show's executive producer, was practically vibrating with excitement. "This is gold, absolute gold," he crowed, slapping the console. An architect proposing to a food critic with a dessert he designed? It's a fairy tale. The synergy is off the charts. He turned to his boss, Mr. Sterling, the enigmatic head of the network, expecting to see the same triumphant glee reflected in his eyes. But Arthur Sterling was not smiling. He leaned forward, his brow furrowed, his gaze fixed on the massive monitor displaying Liam's face. Sterling was a man who had built an empire on understanding what people wanted, but lately, he felt a growing disconnect. He was tired of the manufactured drama, the plastic reality, the endless parade of influencers who were famous for being famous. He was hungry for something real, something with substance, and what he was watching felt profoundly fake. He saw the way Liam's eyes flickered towards the prompter, the slight, almost imperceptible tension in his jaw. He saw the way Serena's smile didn't quite reach her eyes, a flicker of what looked like confusion, or perhaps surprise, as Liam described his creative process for the tart. It was a good performance, Sterling admitted to himself, but it was just that, a performance. The passion felt rehearsed, the emotion synthetic. "It feels hollow," Sterling said, his voice quiet but carrying immense weight in the buzzing room. Marcus stopped his celebration, his smile faltering. "Hollow? Arthur, the numbers are through the roof. People love this." Sterling ignored him, his focus unwavering. "Look at him," he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. "He's describing the dessert like he's reading an instruction manual, not sharing a piece of his soul." There was no fire in Liam's eyes, none of the messy, chaotic, beautiful passion that Sterling knew was the hallmark of true artistry, whether it was in building a skyscraper or baking a tart. He saw a man seizing an opportunity, a carefully calculated move on a chessboard of fame and influence. He didn't know what was wrong with the picture, but his gut, the instinct that had made him a titan of media, was screaming that the beautiful story unfolding on his stage was a beautifully constructed lie. And Arthur Sterling hated lies. Driven by a white-hot surge of adrenaline and despair, Alara made a decision. She would not let him do this. She would not let him steal her mother's legacy and her own identity without a fight. She threw on her coat over her simple clothes, her janitor's uniform hidden underneath, and ran from her apartment. The broadcast tower was only a few blocks away, its gleaming spire a monument to the world that had just so carelessly trampled her. She knew the building's secrets, the service elevators and back hallways that were invisible to the glamorous guests. Her employee ID card, usually a symbol of her lowly status, was now her key. She slipped through a side entrance, her heart hammering against her ribs. The air backstage was thick with nervous energy and the scent of hairspray. She could hear the muffled roar of the audience, the host's voice booming through the walls. She had to get to that stage. She had to tell someone, anyone, the truth. She pushed through a curtain and found herself in a corridor swarming with production assistants and technicians. She spotted Liam and Serena coming off stage, surrounded by a throng of well-wishers. "Liam," she cried out, her voice raw. He turned, and for a split second, his mask of confident charm slipped. She saw a flash of pure panic in his eyes before it was replaced by cold fury. Before she could take another step, a heavy hand clamped down on her shoulder. It was Marcus, the producer, his face a thunderous skull. "What do you think you're doing?" he hissed, his eyes scanning her simple coat and worn shoes with disdain. "This is a restricted area." Alara's voice trembled, but she stood her ground. "He stole it from me. The recipe, it's mine." "He's lying." Marcus let out a short, incredulous laugh. He looked from the frantic, unknown woman to the celebrated couple being showered with champagne and praise. The choice of whom to believe was, in his mind, no choice at all. "Right. I'm sure he did," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Security," he bellowed. "Get her out of here. And someone tell maintenance, we have a cleaner who's lost her mind." He turned his back on her, dismissing her as a lunatic, a piece of trash that needed to be swept away. Humiliation washed over Alara as two large security guards gripped her arms, their touch firm and impersonal. They saw her uniform peeking from under her coat. They saw a nobody making a scene. They didn't see her truth. They didn't see her heart. They just saw someone who didn't belong. Defeated and utterly broken, Alara didn't fight as the guards escorted her away from the dazzling lights and back into the shadows of the building she knew so well. They didn't throw her out, but their warning was clear. "Go back to your post and don't cause any more trouble." The words echoed the sentiment of her entire life. Be quiet, be invisible, know your place. She found herself in a long, sterile service corridor on one of the upper floors, far from the noise of the gala. The air was cool and still. The only sound was the faint hum of the building's ventilation system. She sank to the floor, leaning her head against the cold wall, and finally let the tears come. They streamed down her face, silent tears of grief, rage, and profound loneliness. She felt impossibly small, a speck of dust in a universe that celebrated the shiny and the false. She pulled a small, tarnished silver locket from under her shirt. Inside was a tiny, faded photograph of her mother, smiling, a smudge of flour on her cheek. "I'm sorry, Mama," she whispered, her voice choked with sobs. "I'm so sorry." I let him take it. At that moment, a door at the end of the hallway opened, spilling a rectangle of light onto the polished floor. Mr. Sterling stepped out, having fled the suffocating sycophancy of the post-show celebration. He needed air, a moment of quiet to process the unease that still coiled in his gut. He was walking with his head down, lost in thought, when he saw the crumpled figure on the floor. He stopped. He recognized the blue uniform of the building's cleaning staff. His first instinct, conditioned by years of executive life, was to walk past. But something made him pause. It was the quality of her sorrow. It wasn't the sound of frustration or anger, it was the sound of a soul cracking apart. He saw the locket clutched in her hand, the way her shoulders shook with each silent sob. He saw a human being in immense pain. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice softer than he intended. Elara looked up, startled. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she quickly tried to wipe her tears away, embarrassed to be seen in such a state by the powerful man she usually avoided. I'm fine, sir. Just tired," but her voice betrayed her. It was a fragile, broken thing. Sterling looked from her tear-streaked face back towards the direction of the stage, a connection beginning to form in his mind. He didn't see a janitor. He saw a piece of the puzzle, the missing element of authenticity he had been searching for all night. He took a step closer. "No," he said gently. "You're not fine. Tell me what happened." Staring up at the formidable figure of Arthur Sterling, Elara felt a fresh wave of despair. Why would this man, the king of this glittering, false kingdom, ever believe her? She was a cleaner, a nobody. He was surrounded by people like Liam and Serena, people who knew how to play the game. But then she looked into his eyes. She didn't see pity or condescension. She saw a flicker of genuine curiosity, a deep, searching weariness that seemed to mirror her own. She had nothing left to lose. Her heart was already shattered, her pride stripped away. The only thing she had left was the truth. So, she began to speak. Her voice, at first a trembling whisper, grew stronger as she unburdened her soul. She told him everything. She told him about her 5 years with Liam, about their cancelled anniversary. But she quickly moved past the story of a broken heart, because this was about so much more. She spoke of her mother, of a love for cooking passed down through generations. She described the worn pages of her mother's recipe book, the smell of cinnamon and baked apples that was the scent of her childhood. With a passion that stunned even herself, she described the Mama's Blossom tart. She didn't just list ingredients, she painted a picture. She spoke of the crispness of the northern spy apples, how they held their shape and tartness against the sweetness of the caramel. She explained why the frangipane needed a touch of bitter almond extract to balance the richness. She described the delicate, meditative process of slicing the apples paper-thin and arranging them into a blooming rose, a symbol of a love that unfolds slowly. Her hands, calloused from work, moved in the air as if she were crafting the dish right there in the cold hallway. Her words were not scripted or polished. They were raw, honest, and overflowing with the one ingredient Liam's performance had so glaringly lacked: love. Mr. Sterling listened, utterly captivated. He was no longer in a service corridor. He was in a warm kitchen, smelling the spices, feeling the weight of a family's history. This was it. This was the authenticity he had been craving. This woman, in her simple uniform, possessed more artistry and soul in her little finger than the celebrated stars on his stage. The contrast was stark and undeniable. Her raw, heartfelt story against the hollow spectacle he had just broadcast to the world. A fire ignited in Sterling's eyes. It was the fire of a king who had just discovered a hidden jewel in his own dungeons. A radical, electrifying idea took root in Mr. Sterling's mind. It was a wild, unprecedented gamble that could either make him a laughingstock or redefine his entire network. He didn't care. He had found his truth, and he was going to put it on display for the world. He turned to Elara, whose tears had subsided, replaced by a look of exhausted wonder. "I believe you," he said, the words ringing with absolute certainty. "And everyone else is about to believe you, too." He pulled out his phone and barked orders with a speed and authority that left no room for argument. "Get me a fully stocked mobile kitchen cart. On the main stage. Now. And get a camera on it." He then turned his steely gaze back to Elara. "Can you make it? The tart. Right now. Can you show them?" Elara stared at him, her mind reeling. Go on stage? In her work clothes? Cook in front of millions of people? The thought was terrifying. But then she thought of her mother. She thought of Liam's smug, triumphant face. A new kind of fire, a fire of righteous defiance, began to burn within her. She nodded, her chin held high. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong. Sterling's plan sent shockwaves through the production team. Marcus, the producer, ran up to him, his face pale with panic. "Arthur, have you lost your mind?" he sputtered. The show is over. We're running credits. You can't put a janitor on live television. She's hysterical. Will be a joke. This was the ultimate confrontation between the cynical gatekeeper and the perceptive leader. Sterling didn't even flinch. He looked Marcus dead in the eye, his voice dangerously calm. This isn't a joke, Marcus. This is the real show. We spent 3 hours celebrating curated, manufactured talent. For the next 15 minutes, we're going to see what real passion looks like. Either get that kitchen on stage, or find a new network to produce for. Marcus recoiled as if struck. The threat was real. Defeated, he scrambled to follow the orders. Sterling's gamble was not just on Alara, it was a bet on the audience. He was betting that they too were tired of the facade. He was betting that they were hungry for something real, something true. He was about to risk his reputation on the hidden gem he'd found crying in a hallway. The scene that unfolded was one of sheer, unscripted chaos. The hosts, who had been signing off, were interrupted by Mr. Sterling himself striding onto the stage, a microphone in his hand. The audience, which had begun to disperse, stopped in their tracks, murmuring in confusion. Behind Sterling, crew members wheeled out a gleaming stainless steel kitchen cart. And walking beside him, head held high, was Alara, still in her simple trousers and the blue work shirt she had revealed from under her coat. Liam and Serena, who were posing for photos, froze, their smiles dissolving into masks of pure shock. Liam's face went white. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sterling announced, his voice booming across the stunned silence, "we have an unexpected, and I believe, vital addition to our program tonight. We have just witnessed a beautiful proposal centered around a truly remarkable dessert. But a question of authorship has arisen. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Sterling gestured to Alara. "This is Alara. She has a claim to this creation. And I believe in giving talent a chance to prove itself. So, we're going to have a little surprise bake-off." He turned to Liam, a predatory glint in his eye. "Liam, you claim to have poured your heart into creating this dish. So it should be no trouble for you to make it for us again, from scratch." Panic flared in Liam's eyes. He stammered, "This is absurd. I don't have my tools," but another cart was already being wheeled out for him. The challenge had been laid. The cameras were rolling. There was no escape. What followed was a masterclass in truth versus lies. Liam fumbled. He stared blankly at the raw ingredients. He didn't know the ratio of flour to butter, the temperature for the oven, the secret spice blend. His movements were clumsy, panicked. He was an actor who had forgotten all his lines. But Alara was transformed. The moment her fingers touched the cool flour, all fear vanished. She was no longer a cleaner, a victim, a nobody. She was an artist in her element. She moved with a fluid, confident grace that was breathtaking to watch. She didn't just measure and mix, she danced with the ingredients. And as she worked, she spoke. She didn't address Liam or the hosts. She spoke to the audience, to the camera, to the world. She told them her mother's story. Her voice, filled with love and memory, narrated the creation of the tart. "The apples have to be sliced thin enough to be pliable, but thick enough to hold their flavor," she explained, her knife a blur. "It's a balance." Like love, the audience was spellbound. Serena watched, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning horror, and finally, to a deep, profound shame as she realized the depth of the deception she had been a part of. Alara finished by weaving a perfect, delicate lattice of spun sugar, a feat of confectionery skill that made the audience gasp in awe. Her finished tart was not just a dessert, it was a story, a legacy, a testament to truth. It was a masterpiece of the heart, and beside it, Liam's sad, lumpy attempt was a pathetic confession of his fraud. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. In the court of public opinion, the verdict was unanimous. Liam was exposed, a charlatan whose ambition had led him to commit the unforgivable sin of stealing not just a recipe, but a woman's soul. The clip of the bake-off went viral, a modern-day fable of justice served on a silver platter. His career in architecture, built on a foundation of carefully constructed lies, crumbled overnight. The engagement was, of course, over. A deeply humbled Serena approached Alara backstage, her eyes filled with tears of regret. "I am so sorry," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I was so blinded by the romance, the story he sold me. I never questioned it. He used us both. But what he took from you was so much more. It was the beginning of a long overdue reconciliation, a bridge being rebuilt between two family members separated by pride and circumstance. But the true victory belonged to Alara. She became an overnight sensation, not for the drama, but for her breathtaking talent and her quiet, unshakable integrity. Calls flooded the network. People didn't just want to taste her food, they wanted to hear her stories. They were captivated by the woman who cooked with her entire heart. Mr. Sterling, his gamble having paid off more brilliantly than he could have ever imagined, called her into his office the next day. He didn't offer her a cleaning supervisor position. He offered her a primetime contract for her own show, Kitchen Stories with Alara, a show built not on competition or drama, but on the authentic connection between food, family, and love. The final scene is not one of revenge, but of beautiful, hard-won triumph. Alara stands in her own sun-drenched studio kitchen, a space that looks and feels like home. She is no longer in a janitor's uniform, but in a simple, elegant apron. She looks directly into the camera, a warm, genuine smile on her face. Alara's story reminds us that true worth is not found in the clothes we wear or the titles we hold, but in the fire we carry in our hearts. It proves that a gift, no matter how long it stays hidden or overlooked, can never truly be stolen. So I ask you, who in your life might be a hidden gem, a quiet virtuoso whose talents go unnoticed? Take a moment today to see them, to acknowledge their passion, to tell them that their gift matters. Remind someone of their worth. Share the story if you believe that everyone, no matter their station in life, deserves to have their light shine.